Hi, everyone, and this is Danish with you. Welcome to TOSB Conversation. This is a platform that brings perspectives from leading experts. Excuse me. This is a platform that brings perspectives from leading experts across diverse fields on the ideas that are shaping our world today. Brought to you by the Outstanding Speakers Bureau, a service which works with hundreds of aspiring minds from across the globe who deliver experiential knowledge and cutting edge insights from businesses. And today, our guest is Vanshika Mehta. She's a successful solopreneur who's worked with 70 plus brands globally to create their brand and sharpen their communications. Vanshika holds a cross domain expertise within branding and communications. She is a world citizen. She was born and brought up in Dubai and holds an undergraduate degree in marketing and management from Northeastern University in Boston and only been in India since 2018. In 2021, she was awarded LinkedIn's Top Voice 2021 and LinkedIn's Leader from Pepper Content after amassing 105K plus followers. If she's not working, she's a huge foodie, and her dream destination to travel is Greece. Hopefully, the COVID will be over soon. Vanshika, welcome to TUSB Conversations.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yesterday when we were talking, the stories which you were telling me, right? Without even telling me, I could realize that okay, there's so much of experience which you have gathered. One is your exposure, like I said, 70 plus brands, right? That's I mean, can you count all 70 of them
I
offhand?
really can't. The thing with stories is like, it's just so fun. It feels like you're doing something that's second nature. So, whenever I get a project to do a story, I get really excited because it's like the process is so fun and getting to the entire story is so fun. Like, it doesn't even feel like work. But, like, when I counted it when I was writing my bio, I was like, oh my God, I've done so many. I didn't even realize.
So
But yeah, it's been an amazing
So let,
journey.
let, let let me just say, because our topic is to understand storytelling with brands, right? So, what is
Yeah.
brand storytelling and why is it important?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, the thing is in 2021, right? Your consumers don't just believe if you're here to be like, hey, I'm going to sell you this. They don't care. There's too much of noise in the market. But today's consumers actually care about what a brand is doing. It's not just the product that they're buying. It's not just this dress. It's not just the AirPods. It's I bought Apple AirPods. I bought this dress from Uniqlo, right? They care about the story behind the brand. They care about what the brand is doing. And you can't give this information to your audience in disseminated parts. You have to tell them a cohesive story, and you have to build your brand around that story and with that story, so that your target audience feels like you're making them more like family. And that's what a story helps you with, right? Like, for example, I was working on a pet food project recently, and the entire story is around how do you feed your pet right, and your pet is your family. If you are eating right, you should feed your pet right as well, right? And that emotion is, you can't disconnect the two. It's like, we eat well, we eat what we want, but then your pet doesn't really eat nutritious good food. And how we connected it was so beautiful. Another brand that I wrote a story for is Hyped, and it's a live shopping e-commerce platform. So it's like edutainment plus influencer marketing plus e-commerce put together. And the entire idea was so unique, and to explain it in a way that somebody would understand what it is. So we can't. So when you're telling a brand story, you can't use words like this is Instagram, but this, right? Then you're latching onto another brand. So we had to build an entire story of why this thing was missing, right? So we built a story around the fact that shopping is intrusive on social media, right? Like, nobody goes to social to shop, but yet we see ads and all of that. So why don't we have a platform which is where shoppers can exist, they can do fun things, they can watch fun videos, and based on that, they can go and buy those products. So a brand story basically helps you connect the dots and make sense of the data that you're trying to give your audience in a way that they understand it and are able to process it and feel like they're buying into something bigger. It's not just a Nike shoe, it's not just a MacBook, right? It's like, wow, I mean, look at the brand, look at what they've done, and that feeling comes out when you've written your story well and you understand it properly and are able to communicate it. So the beautiful thing about a brand story is that it's not just a one and done, right? Like even after I write the story and I give it to my client, then it's for them to take that story and give it to the audience again and again and again, right? Like your audience is so busy these days. There's so much of information overload. For your audience to remember your story or the essence of your story, you have to tell it to them, or at least make them see it at least 6 to 8 times, which is like you can't do it like every day. 6 to 8 times doesn't mean कि चलो एक हफ्ता social post कर लिया and that's it, right? It's that top of mind space that if you get it right, you're getting it through the story. It's not your product. You know, when you think of water, do you think of Evian or do you think of Bisleri? That is top of mind space, and that is because they sold you that story, right? Like Evian is known for like the best water, and water is water. There's no difference. It's water. Like essence may the product is the same. What they've layered it with is their brand story, which is why you buy Evian over Bisleri, right? So simple things like this. I mean, it's so fun to build it out, and it's so fun to work with startups that are trying to disrupt the space, and they're trying to make a mark for themselves. And one of the ways that they do it is by doing their branding properly and then doing a brand story properly. Because I tell all of my prospects, like, if you don't do this in the beginning, A, you're going to get the wrong kind of customers, and B, the ones that you're getting will not understand what you're doing or why are you doing it rather. So it's super fun, and a lot of my clients are very early stage startups. So like either they're just about starting up, or they've gone through like one business cycle and are like, okay, now we've got a hint of what we want to do, changes, pivots, and now let's build our story. So I
So,
work with
so
very early stage startups.
so when should you mentioned startups, right? So when should these small brands or the upcoming brands should start articulating their brand story? Like
I
from
mean,
inception, the day they decide, okay, now is the right time, let me just go to Vanshika and say, okay, hi, I have an idea. Tell me a story. Or they have already been in the market for some time and then they start building a story.
yeah, so ideally you should build your story right after you have like a business idea, because the story will trickle into everything that you do, right? How is your customer service responding? How is, when someone comes to your website, what do they read on your about us page, right? If you think that you can just get it done from anybody and be done and take it off as a task list item, you're probably doing it wrong. So I mean, ideally you should be doing this, say, I mean, right after you got an idea, you've done your audience research, you've done your market research. That's when you do your story, because you've got all the three components. It's you, it's your market, your competition, and where's your sweet spot. And then that sweet spot is the story you need to tell your audience. So ideally, I would say as soon as possible. Because see, the thing is, once someone forms a perception of your brand, it's very hard to change it. You're not the McDonald's and you're not the KFC. Like, okay, logo change kar liya, to everybody will notice. And it's that perception building takes time. And like, we're not a big brand, so for startups to change their perception takes much longer than a big organization. Because see, for example, if McDonald's changes something and says tomorrow, okay, we're going to get into pizzas for whatever reason, we'll still go to McDonald's. We're not going to stop going to McDonald's. We might start purchasing pizza from McDonald's. So that big brand has the ability to pivot and move and pick their segment very easily. For a startup, it's very hard. Like, for a startup, if you don't have your brand story done properly and done well and done at the right time, uh, you'll just become another brand, which is the worst thing to happen, right? So if I put your brand and someone else's brand next to each other and I can't tell the difference, or I can't figure out why I should choose you over the other brand, then you're losing out, because then it's just a or situation. You need to move your audience in your favor, and that happens through the brand story. So ideally as soon as possible, but again, a lot of people want to work in the market a little bit, figure it out, do a little bit of trial and error. So that's fine. I mean, I worked on an edtech brand somewhat recently that has been in the market for about 5, 6 years. And now they wanted to kind of shift their positioning into something else because the brand evolved over time. So, I mean, that's also okay. Like, that's also fine. But again, your choice. I would say do it as soon as possible.
Yeah, I think what you mentioned about McDonald's, right? So while you were talking, I just remembered two big companies, Kia and Mahindra. Both of them have
Yes.
changed the logos, and people are recognizing it. But for
Yeah.
startups, obviously the story is slightly different because you're still an upcoming one, and then people are still trying to recognize, right? But when you
Yeah.
say, when you think about it, so is it more on realistically thinking, and there is imagination to the brand storytelling for startups, or is it a mix of both?
So I would say it's data, it's facts plus it's imagination, right? Because um, everybody has an emotion towards something. It's your choice what you want to pull it towards or where you want to put your audience mind frame wise. So there is a little bit of imagination, a little bit of like pulling information from here and there and making two and two match. So for example, if you take Patagonia, right, they're known for their cyclical kind of ecosystem that they've created. They
Mhm.
figured out that every year some like people are throwing out their winter jackets. Give it back to us, we'll refurbish it, we'll make it okay, we'll resell it at a lower cost. Like they're taking complete responsibility over their product, over the environment. And that is a very large commitment that they're giving, but they're living up to it, and that is so essential to their story, right? The story that they've built is that we care about the environment, we want to say zero waste. Our products are good quality. If you have any issues, come back to us and we'll fix it. If you're done with your winter jacket of last year, give it back to us. Like that entire story is lived out every single day in their operations, in the way their store is run, in the way that they're convincing their audience that this is the best product for you. I mean, in Boston, when I was there was a North Face store and a Patagonia store right next to each other. So I mean, it's a great experiment to just see which one people are choosing, and you just stand outside for like an hour and you'll see people choosing based on what it is. And then you'll also see very interesting things where someone buys a North Face last year and then this year tries Patagonia. So it's very interesting to see those stores fairly close to each other and seeing the consumer behavior. That is one way you can tell is your story working or not. Like when you see someone carrying an old winter jacket into Patagonia, you know that the story is working because that's the story that has been sold to them.
Hmm.
So that's just a simple example of how they built that story around caring for the environment. And Patagonia is a brand that um, has a very strong view on things, right? Like during the election time, during climate crisis times, they have a very strong view on things. And that I think is beautiful in the way that they communicate their message through what is happening in the world and be a part of the story. So like I think the Patagonia story as in built end to end, it's just built so beautifully and so holistically.
Yeah, I hope both these stores come to India. We still, keep on waiting. Oh, wait.
Yeah, I
North
don't
Face, you
think
can
you
still, yeah.
need it. You probably don't need it over here, but yeah, I mean, I Patagonia.
Sometimes for people like me who feel extremely cold when it's, and one of my colleagues also, she's the Shreya, she feels extremely cold. So when there is a time when you feel, oh man, I need a jacket, that's the time, that's the first thing which comes to my mind.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, I remember when I went to US in 2011, and I think my mom and dad went shopping with me for my like first winter jacket. I was like, I don't know how to buy a winter jacket, and they got me a like a proper ski jacket. And like, kabhi kabhi like winters mein, like you automatically layer up. So you wear three layers, and then you wear that jacket on the top, and then you start feeling hot. You're like, ye kya ho gaya? So it's a proper like ski
I
jacket.
know,
Like the
yeah,
quality is amazing. Like I
I
wore
agree.
that jacket for like 5, 6 years and nothing. It looks brand new. Like North Face. I mean, beautiful brand. Love it.
I completely agree. So, Vanshika, can you share some tips, right? So, you've given me examples of North Face, Patagonia, you've talked about McDonald's, you've talked about other products. Like, for example, the one story which comes to my mind instantly is about IKEA, right? Their products have very obscure names, right? You don't know how to
Yes.
even pronounce them. But
Yes.
obviously, Inga, if people don't know that he was dyslexic, Inga
Yeah.
was dyslexic, right? So but for him to remember his products, the coding didn't work. So what worked that he named the products after certain areas in Norway. Flower pots was one where he named the products. There was another one I can't remember clearly. Islands, yes, islands in Sweden. He named products after them. So how can startups also do something like that? Are there any examples which you can share, or are there any stories which you can share around it? What tips?
So I mean, the first brand that comes to my mind when you think of product naming is definitely Sugar Cosmetics. They have very fun names for their products. Like their entire brand is so lively, so youthful, so playful that their products also have that product name. I can't remember a couple of them, but I think one of their mascaras was called Wow Mascara or something like that. And like very simple, easy to remember things that, like, when you look at it, you're like, oh, I want this product. Also, I mean, brand story plus packaging plus product, I mean, it all ties in together. Like when you see a Sugar Cosmetics package, you'll know it's Sugar Cosmetics because of the design that they have and all of that. So I think that's one brand that does it really, really well. I always enjoy shopping on their website because it's like, this brand name, that brand name, like they have really fun, cool brand names.
So coming up on wow, you mentioned and the other things, right? What is your favorite? Um, Remember that if you have to think about it, okay, these are one, two which I really love, which stands out. And the reason for why it stands out, one, obviously you mentioned is simplicity. What are the other ones, right?
From brands that I admire,
Yes, yes.
um, have to mention Apple. It's inevitable to talk about brand storytelling and not mention Apple.
Sure.
I think right from the first slogan that they had, which was "Think Differently," till today, with the way that they've built their brand, right? Like, for example, something I found out somewhat recently was WWDC, which is their core event, happens
Hmm.
only once a year. They release product updates only once a year. Other brands do it like every quarter or half a year or whatever. Apple waits an entire year to release their product stuff, and they do it massively. Like I watched WWDC last year or this year actually, a couple of months ago, and it was just a marvel to watch. And the way that they were telling the story of the brand, like the best part of WWDC, if you go and you watch it, they don't make it about the product. They make it about how it's making your life better. Like if you just go watch like 10-15 minutes of it, just pick any section and watch it. It's like, we did this so that this happens for you. We did this, we added this feature so that you can do this. Now all your devices are connected in the house because we felt like we wanted to build a connected ecosystem. So the way that they even that event is a marvel in brand storytelling. To be very honest, it was like, I think 2 or 3 hours long, and I just sat and I watched the entire thing end to end. Another brand that I think needs to be talked about is definitely Sephora. They have very inclusive makeup, and the vibe that you get from Sephora is that makeup is for everybody, right? Like you don't feel like you're go if even I mean if anybody, male, female, walks into Sephora, they feel like they're welcome. And they do that so beautifully. I mean, their social media, the way their staff reciprocates, like just as a brand, right? Like being inclusive about makeup, because makeup was always thought of as a women thing, but now as gender fluidity has come in, it's not just women using makeup, right? It's everybody, and anybody can use makeup. Whoever wants to feel empowered uses makeup to feel empowered and feel better, right, about themselves in whatever way they may use makeup. So that story that Sephora is telling, like it's so beautifully done and so beautifully told across channels, that even when you like, the thing is also Sephora is an online brand plus an offline brand, right? Like they
Mm-hmm.
have stores and they have online, and you really know when a brand story is working if the experience feels the same on both, right? That is when you know that things are working. And like you walk into a Sephora today, you go shop online, you'll notice the semblance, the way that they've put the story together. It's so beautiful. I mean, over here, I mean, I haven't noticed too many male representing makeup artists, but in the US, like there were so many, and I would just go in and be like, teach me how you do this. Like, you look so freaking beautiful right now. Teach me how you did this. And it's just such an amazing environment to be there. Like, I remember the Sephora next to my college used to have like a DJ and stuff on Friday nights, like very playful, very upbeat, very friendly, and very inclusive, right? Like you would see everybody shopping at Sephora. be it face care, be it hair care, be it makeup. Like you'll always find a diverse audience, shopping over there. So those are like two brands that have done it really beautifully. I think someone mentioned Tom's as well in the chat. Tom's entire ideology is buy one pair, we'll donate a pair, right? So they're also making an impact. And when you buy a Tom's, you feel good inside. You're like, okay, if I spend $20 on this thing, someone is going to benefit on the other end. So that entire story that they're telling their audience, right? And Tom's sells a lot in the US. I mean, I haven't seen too many people wearing it here, but a lot of people in the US are wearing Tom's, and that's proof that it's working, whatever they're doing.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Okay.
happy with that.
Vanshika, can we take up questions now? I can see a few of them. In the era where the consumer is being exploited by these e-com companies and unrealistic discounts, how important is it to invest in a brand story? Like where
See,
you
I
get
think
70% discount, 80%.
yeah,
How?
I mean, see, that is all marketing and sales tactic, right? But why why would you buy? Say, I mean, for example, you are a consumer at the end of the day, right? Whether you go to Myntra, you go to Jabong, you go to Flipkart, at the end of the day, you're a consumer. All of this is marketing strategy, right? That doesn't mean that they're swaying away from their brand story, right? Unfortunately, we live in a world where discounts bring consumers, right? And that is a marketing tactic that they're using. But that doesn't sway away necessarily from what their brand entirely stands for and what they're here to do. I mean, at the end of the day, e-com runs on discounts, right? The minute you get an email saying, "Hi, happy birthday, take 100 rupees off," right? You'll go to that website to see कि क्या है, कुछ है मेरे लिए. And the Indian consumer specifically loves discount. Love. Malab, like we are discount hunting. I mean, there's so many people that, whenever I ask them, I'm like, ये क्यों नहीं ले रहे हो? They're like, हम discount के लिए wait कर रहे हैं. Flipkart का big day, वो sale होता है once a year or whatever. They're like, we're waiting for that. So as a consumer, unfortunately, e-commerce has trained us to get used to getting discounts. And it's a vicious circle because if one person doesn't give it, you go to the other person. So everybody is actually in a price war if you actually think about it, which is not a good place to be because today's consumer has a lot of choice, right? Today, do I buy a Lenovo laptop, a Sony laptop, a Mac, or this, an HP? We have too much of choice and too much of information accessible to us very quickly. And to fight that, I mean, at the end of the day, everybody needs to make money, and there's only so much piece of the pie. So the way that they're doing it is through marketing, through discounting, and making it like super cheap, and having like Amazon Prime Day and Flipkart Big Billion Day. So these are all marketing gimmicks, right? And it gets them the sales. But I mean, it's like a spike, right? As a business, it's not like people are not shopping on Flipkart, but when there's a big billion sale, it's like the spike goes up and then comes back down, and then it's done, right? The hype is done after that. So I would say, I mean, it's just unfortunate as consumers we're trained to wait for discounts and look out for discounts. And for example, Apple doesn't do discounts, right? That's a great example. They're like, we don't care. We are premium. You want to buy a product, you buy it at the price that we're selling it. You will not get a discount anywhere. And if you are a sensible consumer, you will not buy a laptop. You will not buy an Apple at least on Flipkart or on Amazon. Like if you're a sensible consumer, you'll go to the store and you'll pay the full amount with your card, right? I mean, I've heard so many horror stories of people buying expensive gadgets on these Flipkart days and Amazon days, and just like in the hope, like in the trust in Flipkart that it's original, but there's only so much Flipkart can do, right? Flipkart is a middleman. They're A to Flipkart to B, right? And so many horror stories, which is why, like, I mean, imagine if tomorrow you start going to malls and Gucci, Fendi, Prada start discounting. You'll be like, "Ye kya hai?" Like you wouldn't buy it, right? You'll start doubting the quality. So it's just unfortunate. I mean, whatever their story is stays, and until that time, that big Amazon day or big Flipkart day, then it's done, and then they go back to normal. So
Yeah.
it's
And
rather unfortunate we're seeing
so
this.
Satish was asking which was the brand which you were talking about before Sephora. I think it's a winter wear. So one was Patagonia, the other one is North Face. If you want to
Yeah,
buy your jackets,
Patagonia,
go for
North
it. Yeah,
Face,
yeah.
Apple
These
we
two
talked
ones.
about,
Yeah. Right. So
and
in
Sugar
this, in
Cosmetics.
yes, yes. Um, this part of mentioning online stores and offline stores, right? Now, when we perpetually we have this in our hand, right? If you take your 1 week reading how much time you spent on WhatsApp, Instagram, Facebook, and other apps, right? You will realize that how much content you're consuming.
Absolutely.
How these small startup brands, how can they stand out in it? Because if you have somebody like an Apple or say Samsung who's pumping in so much of money that no matter what, their brand will keep on popping up. And a startup is struggling. There's an X amount they have. What is it that will make sure that the consumer will catch the product which you're trying to sell?
Yeah, so there's only two ways. Either your product is so different, so good, so out of the world that it's like maybe first in its kind, or you've taken something and you've redone it and it's like amazing product wise. That is one reason people buy. Or the second reason is your brand story, right? So, for example, there's this website I discovered recently, somewhat recently. It's called Dora, and they do beautiful brass jewelry and like their entire story about being handcrafted, about each piece being unique to you, each piece being something that means even the way they name their products, right? Like we were talking about product naming, is so beautiful as a homegrown Indian D2C brand. Like it is jewelry at the end of the day, right? Like I can go and walk into a store and at the gold soup, but me buying a carrot lane versus me buying, say, Dhora, like when I wear a Dhora piece, I'm like, this is made for me, right? It's customized to me, and I mean, custom to a certain degree. I'm not saying that they customize design, but each piece is handcrafted, each piece is handmade, right? And that is so unique in its own way, and the way that they've told their story. I mean, the other day I was on Instagram and actually not Instagram, actually LBB, and I saw this brand that was doing jewelry that was hand painted, and I mean, I was just talking to one of my friends, and on my birthday, my friend actually sent me these very cute fish earrings, and you can actually see the handwork on it, and they had such beautiful packaging. I forgot the brand name, but such beautiful packaging. They had a little note inside, with a poem in Hindi. So, like, all of these things make so much of a difference to your consumer, right? Like, what is the story that you're telling your consumer? Why should someone pick you over something else? Because at the end of the day, I mean, there's too much competition, there's too much information, and we have everything too accessible at this point. So, I mean, you have to think omni-channel. I think that's the first thing, right? You can't just be like, okay, we're going to go super hard on social and we're going to post 40 posts in a month. Like, that's not going to get you any ROI, right? Like, you can't just be like, okay, we're going to put all of our money into Google search. That's also probably not going to get you really high results. The problem is that social media is playing with us, right? In the way that when you think of Facebook, when you think of Instagram, right? The way they earn money is through ads, which is why they kill your organic reach. That is the common myth, and that's what commonly people believe. But when you reach critical mass organically, right, you are still reaching a very large audience, right? Imagine if you have 1 million followers, right? Out of a million, if Facebook even shows it to 10%, that is still a lot of people. So, unfortunately, because of the way social media has been playing us, a lot of startups don't think organic, they think paid. They're like, we'll put in money into social media marketing and we'll get sales, which is not true. It'll happen 100%. It'll get you ROI, but that's not the way to build a brand, right? Like you build a brand by building a relationship, by telling your story, by uh, getting people involved in what you're doing in the day to day, by being transparent. There's so many brands that have pulled back the curtains and said like, hey, we are going to be totally transparent about our manufacturing, our producing, where we're getting our ingredients from, our materials, whatever it is, and that is their story, right? So there's so many ways to do this story, but there's no right or wrong. But I see a lot of startups just saying like, forget organic se kuch nahi hota, let's just go paid, which is probably not the way. Paid will get you sales, organic will get you brand and brand awareness. So you have to
So,
balance those two out.
but Vanshika, when you're saying this thing, one thing which comes to your mind is that experts like you. So TOSB also has advisories, right? Advisory experts they have. So if a brand wants to consult TOSB, we have a long list of speakers who can help you out with brands, right? So when is that stage for brands that okay they should now go for an advisor?
Yeah, so I mean, again, the sooner you do it, the better. Like it's like imagine you running a race with everybody, right? All your competitors. And obviously we're all trying to get to the finish line the quickest. But the sooner you get power-ups or add-ons, the better your brand will be. Right. So all of these things, right? If you ask me tomorrow, like, does a brand story have ROI? I'm like, there's no tangible ROI. I can't tell you, do your brand story, you're going to get 10,000 rupees more of sales. But I can tell you that if you do your brand story, your audience will start relating to certain things. They'll start remembering things about you. You will get that top of mind recall that, when I want to buy shoes, I will buy it from X. And that is something that you can't put a price on, right? You
True.
can't put a price on why you think of Nike, the Swish, and athletes. You can't put a price on that correlation, right? When you think of sports shoes, there are so many brands as Adidas, Puma, Nike, there are n number of brands. But why do you think of Nike, Swoosh, and athletes? Because they've told you that story repeatedly, repeatedly, repeatedly through many different ways, through many different forms. I don't know how many of you have watched it, but there's this video that they released during COVID, which was, I think, 100 plus shots of athletes, and it's a split screen, and they told the story about how staying home is about staying safe and staying safe for all of us. It's a beautiful video. It's probably on YouTube. They released it around COVID time, which they spent hours creating because it was actual footage of athletes on a split screen. So, like, you'll see someone jumping into the water and then you'll see someone doing something else on the other end. But that entire story of athletes plus sport plus stay home for us, stay home for yourself, stay home, like, it's a team sport. They that was the message that they were trying to give, like, staying at home is a team sport, right? It's not just you, it's not just me, it's all of us. So I mean, just the way that it trickles into every little thing that they do is just so beautiful.
And how's your journey been like? When you look
uh
back and working with 70 plus brands and all.
yeah, I I honestly think it's been amazing because no two brands should and can have the same story. So it forces you to think out of the box. It forces you to really empathize with your users. Like, it really forces you to walk towards your consumers and be like, what does this person care about? Like, for example, like, obviously, I mean, again, we're quoting Nike. Nike doesn't focus on their product. Like, they're not like, buy my shoe. They're like, this is what you're buying into, right? So you have to do these researches. You have to go ask the target audience. There are so many times when there is, like, say, for example, if you're in a crowded space, right? So, for example, pet food is fairly crowded and dominated by Pedigree and all of these big brands, right? So how do you stand out? What are you saying that is different? That requires a little bit of audience understanding, like, why do people buy pedigree? What is the reason? Is it convenience? Is it taste? Is it cost? There's so many different factors. And once you disseminate those factors, you kind of come down to the core of why pedigree and not this. And when you do that, then you have to build your story. So it forces you to really get creative in the way that you think, and it forces you to um, think from the target audience's segment, right? For example, Vanchika, who's about 20 something, will buy pet food differently than, say, someone else like Danish, who's n number of years younger or older than I am, right? You and I are different consumers. If you tell me, for example, you're working from home, like, let's, like, make your pet enjoy food or something like that, that might appeal to me. But for you, it might just be something like they might build a story around the fact that, we want your pet to be taken care of irrespective of who's feeding your pet, right? So these little tweaks to each target audience segment make the entire story what it is. So it's a very fun iterative process. I mean, takes about 2 to 3 weeks to do, and once you've done it and you feel confident in that story, then you bring it out onto your website, on your PR, on your social, and it just trickles down into everything. So yeah, that's
So,
the essence.
Vanshika, if you have to give them a framework, right? If a person is just starting, okay, this is what I want to do, and young people, right out of college, they feel, okay, I have an idea. This is what my product will be like, and what should be my story, right? So the first thing they will do is obviously read up on Apple. They'll read up on Nike and other brands, IKEA probably. That's one of my favorites. So that's I keep on saying it as an
Yeah.
interesting story, right? So how do you feel that what's the framework they should need to keep in mind?
Yeah, so I would say I mean, your story is not going to matter if you don't dive deep enough into what the audience problem that you're solving is. Just saying convenience is not enough. Just saying best quality is not enough, because these are all claims. How are you turning those claims into tangible things that your audience can feel, see, touch, experience? So I think the first step is to dive really deep into what the problem is that you're trying to solve. And then the second thing is, how do you explain it uniquely, right? Because just by saying, oh yeah, we're premium and we're this and we're that, nobody cares. You need to explain it to them very, very simply, right? Like, all the brand story, like from what we've talked about, sounds very complicated. But when you write a brand story, you have to write it as if a 10-year-old is reading it, right? It needs to be super simple, and it needs to be cohesive, and it needs to make sense. So first is, I think, dive as deep as you can into your audience's problem. Do a lot of market research. Talk to your consumers, because half the problem will get solved if you start using terminology that your consumer uses, right? This is again a huge marketing hack as well, right? Like, what do you write on your website's landing page? Talk to your consumers, show them your product, see what they're seeing, and then just iterate and use that on your website, right? Like, if your consumers have a perception about your brand, which hopefully is correct, and you use their terminology, you build a lot of relatability. So I think these are the three, four things. And then, I mean, there are so many story structures. There are about five, six, seven, I think, story structures which you can look up. Like, it's very easy. But it basically gives you an insight. So, for example, there's the Cinderella story where she's like really poor, and like she gets her breakout moment and then she goes back. Like, so that's
Mhm.
like the Cinderella story. Or there's the Harry Potter story of like, really down low and then up, 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 and fighting this, and just like an upward thing. So there are all these story structures. And there are so many articles which, when you read it, right, it's so amazing. They'll be like, this movie and this movie and this movie have the same story, and you as a consumer would, as a watcher, would not understand it like immediately. But when you actually think about it, there are only so many story structures that exist in the world. And when you start seeing these patterns, and it's on Google, I mean, I forgot what it's called, but there are, like, you just Google it out, called story structures, or storylines, that will show you those graphs that talk about the story. And you'll start seeing similarities. You'll be like, wait, this movie and this movie said the same thing, they just did this differently. So I mean, it's not a new thing. Brand storytelling has been around for years.
I think
um,
I think one which while you were talking about brands, right? I've realized that nobody talks about teacups. Like, if I ask you, is there a company which comes to your mind when you say teacups? Because India has a tea and coffee are the two things which will connect people no matter what, right? But nobody's talking about teacups. The story is missing. So something like
yeah.
that. So how do you, is there a thing which comes to your mind which people can just take away? Because we're coming to the end of the conversation. So people, if you have any question right now, please feel free. And if you don't want to write it, you can send an email to us if you want. Vanshika as an advisor for your brand, she's there. You can get in touch with TOSB and we'll be able to help you out with it. So Vanshika, any
Yeah.
ideas for teacups?
um so teacups, I mean, I the first brand
So
that comes to my mind is
Satish, yeah, Satish just said Kulhara.
Yeah, so two
Yeah.
brands that come to my mind when I think of, not really the teacup per se, but chai in general. One is Chayos. They've done it beautifully. That Meri
Oh
Wali
yeah,
chai.
yeah.
Meri Wali chai. Like, that story is so amazing, because I was at Chayos day before yesterday, and someone went to the counter and was like, "Bhaiya, ek Meri Wali chai," and I was like, "Damn!" Like, they nailed it with that chai.
Nailed it. Yeah.
Nailed it. And as a brand story, right? Every single time it rains in Gurgaon, I get a message being like, बारिश हो रही है, order samosa and chai, and you just can't resist it. Like they have some crazy good marketing team, marketing. I don't know how they do it, but जहाँ पे भी बारिश होता है, जब भी होता है, I'll always get a message from Chayos. And another one is Red Label. They've always talked about the fact that chai is a brand. A chai is an occasion for families to come together. They
Hmm.
always talk about like किसी की शादी हो रही है, किसी का बच्चा हो रहा है, किसी का कुछ हो रहा है. Like it's always centered around chai. And yet, chai is not the focus of that entire thing, right? So, whenever you see an ad of Red Label, you'll always notice the vibe that they're giving out. It's like a family time, right? Chai is not just you take your chai cup and sit on the side. Chai is something you do with families. It's where conversations happen. These two brands have done the chai storytelling so beautifully. I mean, Meri Wali chai, you just can't beat it.
That's
Like
true.
you can't beat it. Every time I hear it, I'm like, wow, what a
And this
genius
is, yeah,
idea.
this is the
And it's
first.
so
It
simple.
is, it is, it is. That's the first thing which comes. Yeah, meri chai la do.
Yeah, exactly. So Meri Wali Chai, and
Yeah.
you'll never forget that slogan. You'll never forget that. You'll never forget that jingle in your head.
Hmm.
Another one is Paytm. You can never forget their jingle.
Yeah.
Paytm karo. Like once you hear it and it gets stuck in your head. Paytm karo. So simple. Like
Hmm.
I mean, and that was they did this at the time when adoption was still happening. They were still not at the level that they are now. But when they did it, कि Paytm karo, it's so easy. And the way that they put their brand as a verb, right? When you start verb by verb, using your brand as a verb, that's when you get that story in your head, right? So very few people will say Ola karo. People will say yaar Uber karo. Why? Just because like we're so used to hearing that, right? Like
Hmm.
कि Uber order कर लो, Swiggy से खाना मंगा लो, Zomato से खाना मंगाओ, and they're very preferential, right? Like I mean, I use one over the other. I have friends who'll be like, मैं यहाँ से order नहीं कर रही हूँ, मैं वहाँ से order कर रही हूँ. So they've built that affinity with their audience. So these
Hmm.
little like touch points, which might seem insignificant, but over a large span of time, right? Like when you think of Google Pay, you don't think of Google Pay karo, you think of Paytm karo,
Hmm.
right? And so these little things that they leave, these little memories and these little touch points,
Yeah.
are all part of the brand story that they're building.
Right. What Satish is saying that I think he'll have Irani chai today. He's
Yeah.
remembering his college days. Go for
Nice.
it. Onion samosa and Irani chai. Satish, good luck to you.
Yeah,
Right. So
agree,
on
agree.
that note, I would like to thank you, Vanshika, for taking out the time and
I'm
being
so
on the
happy.
TOSB conversation. And I hope you enjoyed the conversation. The people who are there listening to us, that if you have any questions which will come to your mind after listening to it, then you can write an email to us or reach out to us on our social media platforms. And on that note, thank you.